Well, while you could look at something like the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Mayan, and you would say they have no connections because there's so much difference between them. If you start to look at connectives and the way they were similar to each other, it's quite breathtaking too. Not just the fact that they built pyramids and so on, just like the other people had done in Egypt and so on, but there are more connections. In fact, let's look at a dog connection. We were just talking about a dog video before, and so this makes a secondary connection with that, because the Egyptians and Mayans both had dogs in their afterlife. And this has left a lot of researchers kind of scratching their heads on how this would always work, because they had Anubis here with the Egyptians, and he was going to be the thing to help escort you into your afterlife, to go through the perils that you have to do to make it the first time through Osiris. And then you have your Elysian fields, and then you roll through the idea of the book of coming forth by day. And not only did he help in the ritual here, but he's also going to be in the boat and help you out on that whole concourse, along with Horus and Set. Set has to be there to make it by Apep the snake, because he's the only one who understands how to keep him from being hypnotized by the snake. Kind of like in Mowgli in the Jungle Book, where that big snake tries to hypnotize him with the hypnotizing eyes and stuff like that. Yeah, so Set had to be there too. Regardless of all their history before then, they're all still there. In fact, the boat ends up making it to Osiris. But there are more connections to just this little concept that's here. But we understand that Osiris had this idea in the afterlife, and if you didn't pass that effect and your heart wasn't as light as a feather, that you'd be eaten by this creature that was somewhat hippopotamus and crocodile, and just have your heart thrown to him as a food, and then you would lose the ability to have an afterlife. It's just like the idea of meeting him at the pearly gates and seeing how good you've been as a person. Same concept as weighing your heart like a feather and all that. So a lot of this that they look back at as being pagan is really no different at all. They just want to act like it is, but it's really not. So where do they get these stories from that lead all the way up to this idea? Well, they have a god of death in both of these stories. And while it's shown as being El Morte here on the right-hand side, in reality, they have a dog as the Mayans. That's a god of people that have been deformed, problems with that, and death. Showing you pretty much that if they had a child that had cleft palate or real problems with it, what was usually done with those and its close association. Just like in Anubis and the idea, the ancients will tell you that some people used to take their dead and leave them out there for the dogs to basically chew them up for a while before they ended up starting to do the rituals with them. It didn't make any sense before, but the fact of being around the dogs lets you make it into the afterlife. It's crazy. But so there's also a connection to this, which is Zelotl. And Zelotl is also a dog, just like Anubis is shown here to be a dog type of creature, serving the same idea. Along with those Pokemon Go balls that are all around everything usually. But that dog that's there has got to be connected with the idea of an ancient dog. One of the earliest stories, and I've done videos about this, one of the earliest mythologies we can find is this, that whenever you go on the trek to the afterlife, you're taking your dog with you. So this probably only dates 22, 24, 26,000 BC, somewhere around there when we started really manipulating dogs. And that idea that they would help you into the afterlife. So you brought a little chunk of extra food to help share with the dog to make it past him past a certain point. You make it past a certain bridge, you're actually into Hades. It's the whole idea of the river Styx and all of that, all thrown into one kind of concept there. But this dog guy that's there is, of course, from the Mayans and not from the pyramids. But they both got to go through an underworld trek that's very similar to each other, and it involves a dog with them. And of course, Zabulba is the idea of going through the underworld there. But in the idea of the Egyptians, they had the idea that it ate your heart and then you just were lost to the abyss. In this idea here, even though they caused heart sacrifices and things like that we're well familiar with, in this concept, if you almost made it into heaven but didn't, you just basically fell off the track into the bottomless pit and fell into something that's more like hell, I guess you'd say. But then again, whenever we look at the similarities, there are quite a few of them. About a year and a half ago, I did a series of 12 videos showing you connections between India and Egypt, between here and here, between here and here, things that they have, symbology, and it means the same thing to the people. Showing you that there are connectives that people are not willing to even look at, like they just came up with that. Well, as I talked about in that video, whenever you come up with something like that, that's 1 in a million. But then whenever you have that person do X, and both people are doing X, that makes it 1 in a million times 1 in a million. It gets to the point of, no, there's no way, there's not a connective. Oh, well, how about if they do this, that, and the other, they have this symbol attached to them, and da-da-da too, and it gets, hey. It gets to the point there are too many connections, but of course nobody wants to agree upon any of them. Let me know what you think down below. We'll get on to another story here showing you connections with ancient people. Peace.